Behind closed doors, where the cameras are off and a heavy silence looms, the fate of nations is decided. Presidents, foreign ministers, and military commanders draw up plans that can push a country into the abyss of destruction or raise it from the ashes into a new power. The Middle East has always been the playground of great powers, a region where oil, gas, religion, ideology, and geopolitics are intertwined, and where every move of a single piece can create waves of unpredictable change. In this arena, Iran has always been one of the key players, a government that sees itself as a spiritual empire and the leader of the resistance, yet, over the past 4 decades, has repeatedly fallen victim to the power games of the world's superpowers. From the Iran-Iraq war to nuclear negotiations and economic sanctions, the heavy shadow of global powers has always loomed over the country. But now, it seems that Iran has reached the most critical juncture in its history. A few months ago, when Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria collapsed and Russian forces withdrew from Damascus, Tehran was thrown into shock. For years, the Islamic Republic had spent billions of dollars to keep Assad in power, only to suddenly realize that Moscow was no longer interested in this game. Vladimir Putin, who once portrayed himself as Tehran's ally, was now making deals with Ankara and even NATO. But this was just the beginning. Since the outbreak of Syria's civil war in 2011, the Islamic Republic of Iran has spent an estimated $100 billion to maintain the Assad regime. The Quds Force deployed its troops, mobilized Hezbollah, and created a network of Shia militias to defend Assad's rule. Tehran believed that if Syria fell, the entire axis of resistance would crumble. But what Iran failed to account for was Russia's own geopolitical interests. For decades, from the chaos of the Middle East, groups had emerged calling themselves the Resistance, though everyone knew the strings of these militant puppets were pulled by Iran. Hezbollah, the first and strongest among them, had taken shape in the 1980s with the backing of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. Every rocket fired from southern Lebanon was a message from Tehran to Tel Aviv. In Iraq, after the fall of Saddam, militias like the Popular Mobilization Forces, trained by the Quds Force, became Iran's shadow army on Iraqi soil. In Syria, when the civil war erupted, Shia militias from Afghanistan and Pakistan fought and died to keep Assad in power. In Yemen, the Houthis, once an isolated faction in the mountains of Sada, turned into a serious threat to Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, thanks to Iranian missiles and drones. In Gaza, Hamas and Islamic Jihad built underground tunnels and stockpiles of deadly rockets with Iranian funding and technology. Each of these groups played a role in a grander strategy, one that Tehran had carefully crafted over the years. But this game did not last forever. After years of engagement with these proxy forces, Israel launched a series of complex and targeted operations, what has been called the New Middle East Order, delivering devastating blows to them. The infrastructure of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza was reduced to rubble by heavy airstrikes. Hezbollah's key commanders were assassinated one after another, and their weapons networks in Syria and Lebanon were systematically dismantled. In Iraq, PMF bases were weakened by airstrikes and political pressure, while in Yemen, the Houthis' defensive systems failed to withstand the intensifying attacks. The resistance forces, once empowered by Iranian support, were now crumbling under Israeli fire. Tehran, which had once relied on these groups to solidify its influence in the region, now watched as they were gradually dismantled. Meanwhile, Putin had never truly been committed to Assad's survival. Unlike Iran, Russia was only interested in securing its military bases in Syria. When the situation turned against Assad and NATO and Turkey applied greater pressure, the Kremlin made its decision, a deal that would secure Russian interests in Syria while distancing itself from Tehran. When Assad suddenly fled to Russia, it became clear that Moscow no longer intended to act as his protector. This event was a massive shock for the Islamic Republic. Tehran, which had always assumed Moscow stood behind it, now found itself abandoned in the battlefield. It seems that beyond Syria, an even larger deal is taking shape. Russia and the United States, two global superpowers, are negotiating Iran's future behind closed doors. Evidence suggests that their foreign ministers have discussed Iran at a recent summit in Saudi Arabia. This means that the fate of the Islamic Republic may no longer be decided in Tehran, but rather in the Kremlin and the White House. Vladimir Putin, who has always prioritized Russian national interests above all else, is seeking to de-escalate tensions with the West. The war in Ukraine has cost him heavily, and sanctions have taken a severe toll on Russia's economy. In this situation, he is willing to sacrifice his bargaining chips to win favor with the West, and one of those bargaining chips is the Islamic Republic of Iran. On the other hand, Trump has taken a far more aggressive stance toward Iran. Having previously withdrawn from the JCPOA, Iran nuclear deal, he is now, after returning to power, likely seeking a new agreement with Russia. If that agreement means weakening the Islamic Republic, Moscow has no reason to resist. In such a scenario, Tehran finds itself at a dangerous crossroads. The key question remains: can the Islamic Republic survive this crisis, or will it face the same fate as Bashar al-Assad's government? There are three possible scenarios for Iran's future. Just as Assad's fall came at the hands of opposition forces, Iran's internal situation may deteriorate to a point where the regime collapses from within. Economic pressure, widespread protests, and declining legitimacy could pave the way for a rapid downfall. If this happens, Iran could descend into internal chaos, opening the door for regional powers like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and even Israel to intervene in shaping its future. If Iranian leader Ali Khamenei recognized the imminent danger of war, they might follow the path of North Korea or Libya and move toward negotiations with the West. This scenario would involve retreating from regional ambitions, cutting support for proxy groups, completely dismantling the nuclear program, and even making internal policy changes. While this could preserve the regime, it would also mean a major transformation in its power structure. In this scenario, the Islamic Republic chooses to resist pressure and maintain its confrontational stance. This would be the most dangerous path. If Iran continues on this course, military conflicts with Israel, the United States, or even regional states could escalate. Trump has already hinted at a severe bombing campaign against Iran. Economic pressures could also reach a breaking point, intensifying internal crises and pushing the country toward collapse. Given recent developments, it is evident that Iran is at a critical turning point in its history. The decisions made in the coming months and years will shape the country's trajectory for decades to come. Will the Islamic Republic find a way to ensure its survival, or will it become a casualty of global power plays? Are Putin and Trump secretly determining the future of this regime behind the scenes? The answers to these questions remain unclear, but one thing is certain: difficult days lie ahead, and any misstep could change the course of history for Iran.